welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 44, Return to Writing in a Kindle World, an interview with Louella Nelson, coming to you on Thursday, March 29th, 2018. This is our fourth and final episode in our series on writing in Amazon's Kindle Worlds. And today's guest, Louella Nelson, is a sweetheart and incredibly knowledgeable about the writing craft. She also has some wonderful encouragement for anyone who's taken a break from writing but is ready to get back into it. I think you're going to find it's a great show. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is best-selling author Louella Nelson. Louella is a professional editor and mentor, an award-winning university writing instructor, and is multi-published in romance fiction, both historical and contemporary, as well as nonfiction. She has been president of the Orange County chapter of the Romance Writers of America, coordinator of the National RWA Conference, and a speaker at RWA National, as well as chapter and regional conferences. She is at work on Bestseller Secrets, a series for writers. Louella lives in Southern California, where gardening, body surfing, and taking extra special care of her kitties augment a wonderful life. Welcome, Louella.
Thank you so much, Kitty. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. This is so fun to have all of these wonderful Kindle Worlds people who are actually people that I already love and adore on the show.
Thanks. I
Yay. Okay, so what I've been mostly asking all the others is a lot of the similar questions, but listening to all your different takes on it is the most interesting thing, I think, for all of us listening. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your writing life and writing career before you got into the Kindle Worlds, and then we'll start talking about Kindle Worlds.
All right, that sounds good. I was a Harlequin author for several years, and my first 5 books were published by Harlequin.
Nice.
Not to get too heavy, but my mom passed away, and I finished the book, and then my creativity went underground for about, I would say, 15 years, 20 years, and I thought that I had lost it. It was a very sad thing because I mentor writers for a living. I teach writing at a college, and I teach series classes about fiction, teach composition, and then I mentor a few groups in my home. So writing is my everything, as they say.
Yeah.
You know, it's just an inspiring, wonderful way to go through life, to be a writer. So it was hard, but then I would say maybe 4 years ago or so, I just got this inspiration to write again and to write a story. So I wrote a story set in 1938, I think it is, in Virginia, which is a place I've never been.
Oh, wow.
And I showed it to a few writers, and they said, wow. And you know, writers, we love wow.
Yes.
Our work. So reads our work. So I ended up republishing 2 of my Harlequins and writing a few short stories. And actually, Debra Holland, who's a best-selling New York Times writer, encouraged me to get them out on the internet. And so I published them on Amazon. So I've been published, self-published, but I've also been traditionally published. And this was all before I was writing for Deborah's Kindle World.
Okay.
So that's kind of the backstory. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So tell us a little bit about how you and Debra met. Like we already know if listeners have already heard the interview with Debra, we know a little bit about it, but why don't you just kind of refresh us? How did you guys meet? And then how did this, I think I should write in your Kindle World happen?
Okay. So Debra and I are now both members of Romance Writers of America. And as you mentioned, I was president of the Orange County group, and so fairly well known. And what I was doing then was I taught at Learning Tree University, and then a group of women, about 10 women, said, please, 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 could you mentor us? Could you keep teaching us? So I started a women's group in my home on Fridays.
Wow.
Debra just heard about it, I believe, and she contacted me. And I didn't let people come into any of my groups unless they had some background in writing. And so I took Debra as a private client and taught her craft, taught her characterization and plotting and scene construction and all of the things that we need to do as professional writers. And then eventually she went into my Friday group. That Friday group lasted several years.
Wow.
I went on then to teach at Cal State Fullerton in the extension. And then from there, I taught at UCI and I developed all of their writing programs, all of fiction writing programs, and taught them beginning, intermediate, advanced. And I already had taught marketing books at Cal State Fullerton. So Debra and I, when the Friday group disassembled, Debra and I kept in touch. She kept writing. She's amazing. She is a close, dear friend, and we write together here at my dining room table. I'm exactly where I write my book. She sits to my right, and she spoils my kitties. And, so we have kept in touch, and I have been her developmental editor for ages, for all of her fiction books, years and years. And so that kept us closer yet. We had regular contact as she became a best-selling author. And I have a picture of her. She and I went to lunch at King's Fish House, and I brought her a cake that said, "Congratulations, USA Today best-selling author." So she's been a best-selling author for lots and lots.
Aw.
And then, okay, so 4:00 in the morning 2 years ago, I woke up with a complete scene in my head that would not let me go back to sleep. You know what that's like.
I do.
Writer. So I came downstairs to the computer here in my dining room, which I prefer over my office. And I typed it all out, and I kind of liked it. I thought, gosh, that's really interesting. An 1886 in Montana, which was a book that I had just edited for Debra. She had written a book set in Montana in 1886 or somewhere around there.
Okay.
So anyway, I wrote this scene and I sent it to her. Meanwhile, Debra was on a plane, took it with her, read it on the plane, and she went to a conference in New York City. She met with all her Amazon contacts who love her. And they had been asking her to open up a Kindle World for a long, long time.
Okay.
She liked this scene I sent, and she said to them when they asked her again, "I think I'm ready to do the Kindle World." So my book, hold on just a second, let me show you. Rise, Reprieve, okay? The model is a good friend of Debra's, so she suggested look at his art, his pictures, and I selected one of them for the cover of Rise, Reprieve.
Oh, wow.
So that is the first book that got released, along with, I think it was about 8 more authors, some of whom I know and some of whom I didn't know.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of launched us. And that was in February of, I think it was 2016. I was at the time, but I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Things have gone really quickly then, because I think Debra said that she was thinking there was around 60 books in the world already.
Yes, there are roughly 60 books out there now. And Amazon, the sweethearts that they are, allowed us to put out more than one year. And as her stable of Kindle World, Montana Sky Kindle World writers grew and grew, she talked about it at other conferences with other authors, and they tried it and they enjoyed it. So Amazon let us put out 2 books a year and then 3 books a year. Now, I don't write that rapidly.
Yeah.
I have too much teaching and gardening and other things I want to do. But yeah, it just grew and grew and grew, and it got very successful. And some of the writers have made very, very good money. And we have had so much fun getting to know each other, working working with each other, sharing ideas. I would call up or I would text or email Linda Carroll Brad, for example, and say, what was the name of that hero in that book that ran the leather shop in Morgan's Crossing, Montana? And then she described the character for me, and I put him in my book.
Nice.
Collaborate that way, and it was so fun. It was.
That does sound kind of great. Now, you're part of the Facebook group, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, it's an invitation-only Facebook group. So it has just the writers that are in this Kindle world sharing ideas. We keep a Bible of characters and dates and who they marry and what their kids' names are and all of that. And I did a map of Morgan's Crossing, which is where I set my books. A lot of the writers set them either in Morgan's Crossing or in Sweetwater Springs. Both of those towns were created by Debra Holland.
Wow.
So I did a map of Morgan's Crossing so we could figure out whose ranch was where.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah. What is the name of the book I'm reading right now? Is it Bright Montana Sky? Is that Debra's newest book?
That is her newest book. Yes.
Yeah. So Debra is on the short list with Tessa Dare of the only two authors that I have bought their books at full price when my husband is unemployed and I shouldn't be spending money because I download the Kindle samples when I tell myself, don't do it. You know what will happen? And then I'll be like, honey, I got to buy this book because I'm in the middle of chapter 2 and it's the end of the sample.
I mean, there's just no other better endorsement for a writer. I told Debra that.
Yeah, it's so true. I need
to tell her, she'll hear it now.
Yeah. I definitely should tell her. I told Tessa once and she's like, you shouldn't be buying things when your husband's unemployed. I'm like, I know. Oh, so yeah, I'm enjoying the worlds and it's fun as a reader because you're like, wait a minute, that character's familiar. I'm sure I've read them in one of the other books. And then you're like, oh, but that character isn't. This is a different pastor or reverend or whatever they're called. And I'm like, wait a minute, this one says that his son joined them. But the book that I read, I'm pretty sure that he had a daughter. Wasn't that meant? I'm sure that was Montana Sky. I don't read that many historical Western, sweet romances. So it's fun because you're like, your brain's working away trying to figure out, oh, wait a minute, maybe what I read was, one of the other Montana Sky books, or maybe I'm missing these because that's where those characters came from.
Exactly right. Debra has this core of readers who read all of her books and all of her other colleagues' books that are related to the Montana Sky series. And they love meeting up with a character that they met 3 books ago and finding out what they do now and seeing the description of the character again.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, it feels a little bit like a family.
Yeah.
Family that goes out into the world, and we're connected to all those people that are faithful fans.
Yeah.
Great to hear. Yeah.
Well, and it reminds me of, I wasn't a big romance reader when I was younger, but I had gotten involved in a Jude Devereaux book with the Montgomerys. And then I could not read a book that had the Montgomerys in it. And it didn't matter if it was 1200 or, 1950, or I had to read every book that had a Montgomery in it. And this is the same. It's just so fun. You get so excited about, seeing, oh, that's the cousin of so-and-so. Oh, is that the good cousin or the bad cousin?
I can relate to that because I just listened on audio tape to every one of Diana Gabaldon's Outlander books. And I'm just such a fan. She's so brilliant. She uses adjectives in a most brilliant way.
Yeah.
Now I'm on to Anne Perry, who a little earlier time and in London, a detective series with a guy named Monk, the central character. Actually, she has 2 series, and I'm listening to both of those. And then, let's see. Oh, I think I'm surprised you didn't mention Kathleen Woodowitz. Have you ever heard?
Yeah, I've heard of her.
She was early on in the business.
Yeah.
She was like one of the classic ones. But I don't just read romance, and I guess you don't either.
Right. Yeah. I love, Stephen King and Dean Koontz. My favorite author for the last probably 10 years is, if somebody made me say, this is my one author that's my favorite, I would have to say Jim Butcher, who writes the Dresden Files series about a wizard in Chicago who helps the Chicago Police Department with unusual cases.
Now, I have one of those favorites too, and it's James Lee Burke. And James Lee Burke is another person who uses language to a high art. He's been writing for many years. I've read several of his books, and I've listened to several of his books on audio. And I would always recommend James Lee Burke as a good storyteller, really strong characters, good motivation. And he has a respect for women in his books that I really appreciate.
Oh, nice.
Female characters.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to read one of his. I'll download a Kindle sample and then say, honey.
There you go.
Now, when I was interviewing Debra, one of the things that she thought would be fun was kind of the different places where you and Linda and Christy were coming from in your writing life when you got started. So Linda had already, I guess, written and published some Westerns before she started writing in Debra's World. Mm-hmm. Christy has been writing, but she's brand new to a Kindle World, and her writing career is closer to the beginning. But she was telling us in her interview, had written a bunch of Gold Rush stories that she just hasn't published yet. And that was how Debra, was like, hey, you should consider my world. And what Debra was telling us a little bit about you was just that you had been writing, as you mentioned, and then you weren't writing, and then this kind of kicked it off. She said it was kind of like you woke up in the morning and showed her pages and said, okay, I've written something. And she said, well, I guess I have to do a Kindle World then.
Yes, so, other than the short stories, you are absolutely correct. This got me, just knowing Debra and having her encourage me to get to write a book with the scene that I had sent her that she read on the plane, got me back into writing full-length fiction. And
that's wonderful.
Great. I love it.
That's wonderful. I'm particularly happy because I'm sure that there are other listeners who have been in the position that you were at 15 years ago, where something happens and you just stop. And it's always encouraging to find someone who, no matter who or what the situation is, we're like, wait, that person understands how I feel. Maybe I can do what they did and come back again.
Yes, and if it happens to any of the writers who are listening to this right now, I want to say that the time is not wasted. I went to Chapman University and finished my bachelor's degree, and then I went on to Cal State Fullerton and finished my my bachelor's and then my master's, and began a teaching career. And so it formalized what I was doing for free for years and years, which was mentoring writers. It's just in my blood, So the upside is that I perfected my skills, my knowledge of fiction, because I was an English major in my master's degree. And it allowed me to bring a richness to my writing that I wouldn't have had unless I finished learning, and I may go back.
Yeah. Oh, that's very encouraging. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband says that I can't go back to school and become Dr. Kitty and, anything until I finish paying off the student loans from the master's degree.
Tell me about it. It's going on forever, isn't it?
It is. But I have to admit, as much as I was, disappointed in many ways about what I was learning in formalized education about writing, only because, and I'll say this until the cows come home, the Romance Writers of America, they know how to teach writers how to write better. They really do. And, for $100 a year membership, I'm just telling everybody, it's the thing that you should consider. But there is a lot to be said about learning what other people have done in the past. I don't think it's all that helpful to creating a commercial fiction career, but it is interesting to read a book that was written, say, 300 years ago. This happened to me. One of my, I had to read, and I might have the 300 wrong, but Gustave Flambeau, Madame Bovary.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was one of the books that I had to read. And at first I was like, okay, this is, like I can't even pronounce the name of the author. I'd heard of it.
Flaubert. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Flaubert, yeah. And I was thinking, okay, this book is like hundreds of years old. I can't imagine what I would get out of it. And I'm reading it and I'm beginning to giggle. And then we get to class and we're discussing it. And I'm embarrassed because I'm coming at it from, I'm an American in an Australian university. My professor has a PhD in 17th century French literature, and I'm writing romance and superhero fiction for women. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I hope he doesn't call on me. But it's a small class, he calls on everybody. Yeah. And everybody else were giving all these very literary answers, to his questions. And I was like, well, I can only just be myself. And so he called on me, and I just was kind of had that embarrassed face, and I started giggling. I said, I can't help it. I thought it was really funny. I mean, they're supposed to be all, fancy and on a date, and she steps in horse manure, and I just thought it was really funny. And he laughed. I couldn't believe it. He's like, it's supposed to be funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, I read it right.
You got it. You got it.
So
I learned about symbolism in a wonderful class on the Brontes in Long Beach. Beth Lau was the instructor, so it was Professor Lau. She was wonderful. She was so steeped in the Brontes, and especially I fell in love with Charlotte Bronte. The Jane Eyre novel and the other novels that she wrote. And I'm always watching a special on TV, on PBS or what have you, about the Brontes' lives and what they read and what they wrote and what motivated them, because it's just all fascinating. But that was my area that I focused on, was 19th century British literature.
Wow.
Charles Dickens and all of that. And in Jane Eyre, there's a fire and ice theme that goes through that book. And if I hadn't had that class, I would not know that. And I would not know to recognize it in Game of Thrones and some of the other work that's out.
Right.
It taught me a little bit about symbolism, and I use that in my writing. And some readers may not get it. They may not, it might go right over their head, but I don't care. I enjoy doing it. Slip it in there.
Yeah, that's right. Now, did you get started in sweet Western romance because you were interested anyway, or was it just like years of editing Deborah and having it all in your head, or how did that start?
Right. Well, for Harlequin, I was a contemporary writer, super romance and Harlequin Americans, which are pretty contemporary and bold. And but my reading pleasure since I was a young woman was historical, and that was whether it was Russian or American or German. These writers who wrote historical novels, I just ate it up. And Itzhak Dinesen and Flaubert and of the other writers. And so I always had an interest in historical fiction. And I started a historical fiction book that was set in the 1788-89 in Haiti, the only Black uprising in world history, the only successful Black uprising in world history to at least 20 years ago.
Wow.
And, I wrote character sketches. I wrote scenes. I have never finished that book. And I know what you mean about the Valentine book, because this book is still sitting there. But it's a bigger than the sweet historical romances that I'm writing right now. So it's not on my plate right away. I'm doing all I can to write Montana Sky novels that are in my series. The series is called the Harper Ranch series.
Oh.
It starts with 4 sisters that come across the country and settle in Morgan's Crossing and have hard times. And of course, there's a hero who falls in love with one of the sisters. And he has issues of his own. He's got a dark secret, and he has to work through that in order for them to be happy together. But I'm just working through the sisters and through some of the spin-off characters that know the sisters and that interact. The current one is a guy who was the bad guy in, the bad guy in Rebel Love Song.
Okay.
Can you see that?
That's a beautiful cover too. For anybody who's not watching on YouTube, you might want to go back and look at these lovely covers.
Thank you. So the bad guy in that, who was a federal agent trying to stop a suffragette, one of the Harper sisters was a suffragette writer.
Cool.
He ends up to be the hero in the book I'm working on right now. And so, yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay, so you've worked for Harlequin. I don't know how different Harlequin has become since you stopped working for them. I mean, a lot of things have changed over 15 years.
Yes.
But so tell us a little bit about working with Amazon. What do you think about it? How do you like it?
Okay, so I work with Amazon on 2 levels. As I said, I was Debra Holland's developmental editor, and I became a developmental editor for Amazon as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I've done, and developmental editing, for those who don't know, is to look at theme, consistency of dates and names and places, plot lapses or threads that need to be picked up at the end. They're called loose ends. You need to finish it off at the end. Depth of character, motivation of character should be clear to the reader, all these kinds of things. So it's not copy editing. It's not necessarily correcting grammar, although that's a big part of it too. So I did some work for Amazon in that regard. And I'm also writing Montana's Guide, Kindle World, romance, historical romance set in Morgan's Crossing and elsewhere.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's not the heavy, really layered, deep work of some of the early historical fiction romance writers that I've read in my past.
Mm-hmm.
I do make it as beautifully written as I possibly can, with characters that people can relate to and issues that we've all been through or will go through at some point in our lives.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it. And Amazon is just fabulous to work with. They have good reps who, if we have a question, if we get stuck at the moment that we're supposed to launch our story into Amazon with the cover and so forth, we can just email them or call them and they'll be right there for us. So I'm working with them.
That's wonderful. That's great. Wow. Well, so since you're an editor, you're used to giving advice, I imagine.
Yes.
So
sometimes you can't shut me up.
Well, we may have to bring you back on and talk about what kinds of self-editing people can do and when they need to start looking for an editor. Everybody always wants to know, what more can I do with my own work?
Sure.
So, but for right now, what sort of things do you think that if listeners are considering writing in one of the 90 or so Kindle Worlds, what sorts of things would you give them as advice, either from your position as, you've been an editor for Amazon and now you've been a writer in a Kindle World?
So, are you asking what should they think about when they're selecting a world?
You know what? Whatever.
Writing?
Whichever kind of direction you want to go, whatever advice you feel like, I have something to say about, this that would be helpful to people. Yeah.
Sure. So the tried and true advice is write what you know. And I lived in backwoods of Maine. I lived in Alaska. We had very rural sections in our life and very urban sections in our life as I was being raised. I love camping. I love fishing. My brothers hunt. They subsistence hunt in Southeast Alaska, where they live with their families.
Wow.
And I don't do any hunting. And I don't need to because I live in Southern California. So I buy my food or they send it to me, which is a treat.
Nice.
But yeah, I've also owned horses and enjoyed, having horses in the family when I was married and my daughter was young and when we were raising her. And so that's that's what I know, what I like. And so if I have a character come out of town and throw a line into the river, into Morgan's Crossing River, I'm going to know how they're going to do it, what they're going to use for bait, what they're going to pull out of there, and so forth. I would have researched it.
Nice.
So, I think that the Kindle world that I'm in works for me. If someone else has been watching Star Wars forever and is fascinated with space or with fantasy or with science fiction, and they are a writer, they have, done their homework about craft.
Yeah.
I think they should choose a world that's more suitable for their interests, what they love, and what they would sit down at a computer for months on end and out and be thrilled with it and be interested in it.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, is I would look for a topic that really touches their heart. Yeah.
And do you think that writing in the Kindle world is, it seems like it's one of the ways that kind of helps jumpstart you back into a full-time writing career. But on the other hand, you woke up with a story idea, and that's what happens to us. So I don't know which one's the chicken and which one's the egg, but any advice about people who are trying to decide, well, maybe I should just, go my own road and either self-publish or traditionally publish outside of, looking into Kindle worlds. Some people are just going to be trying to decide, I don't know, is it for me?
So there are a few benefits from going into a Kindle world. One is that you would have a fabulous mentor like Debra Holland to talk with about her world and her vision, because you can't go against the original vision. That would not be fair to the readers.
Right.
So that's one benefit. Another benefit is collaborating with fellow writers, like we do on that secret Facebook page.
It does sound so fun. I don't write historical Westerns, and it makes me want to, just so I can be part of it.
I hope you do, Kitty, and I think you would be wonderful. I have read you're already a wonderful writer, and I think you'd be a great addition to the stable of writers working together right now.
Thank you.
So from that standpoint, it's less lonely than being a one-off novelist.
Yeah.
You have been there, I have been there, and I am enjoying sharing with Linda Carroll Brad and with Kit Morgan and with so many of the wonderful writers that are in Deborah's Kindle world. So that would be one benefit, I would say, is that you're not alone. You have advice from fellow writers. Of course, you could do that in a critique group of, and many people do. But
Right.
being specific to this world is also helpful.
Yeah.
And if you go off track and start talking about mining in the 1880s, then you share that with one of the other writers. They can correct you and say, "Wait, Lou, that's not how it happened."
Right. Yeah, Christy was telling us this interesting story about how she likes visiting, historic sites, and she visited a site, and then I'll let everybody, listen to the interview themselves and get it correctly. But I think she said that she went to this historic site, and then the beginning of the tour guide's, little spiel was, this is the person who originally built and owned this building. And she was like, wait, this is a guy I've been researching, and I didn't even know this building was his building. And she said she just totally got all geeky and happy, and it does sound fun.
Yeah, research is fascinating. And I think the research is fun. Now, if I could, I would go to all the sites. And when I was writing for Harlequin, I did do that. I went to Patrick's Point and camped in Northern California and a number of places. And I did a book launch in some small towns in Southeast Alaska and then ending up in Juneau. So, there's some exotic travel associated with writing, but you don't have to do it because the internet is so accessible now. But
yes.
The historical research is available through the Smithsonian, through individual internet websites of aficionados. It's just tons and tons of research available to us, and it can be corroborated by other sites. So, yeah.
Right.
It's great. I love it.
Oh, this sounds great. And do you have like a special thing that you're particularly interested in? Like Christy has that special thing about gold rush days and that sort of thing.
Well, I think ranching, or the people that are associated with ranching, because I love horses. I always loved horses, and I know a little bit about them. But there's another thing in my books that I just recently discovered that I write about, and that's secrets.
Oh.
So every one of my characters, whether it's the hero or the heroine or both, has a secret in some way that they have not dealt with in life and they need to deal with in order to be worthy of love and the happy ever after. So, for example, this hero is Jewish in a Western town, and so does not make a big deal about that. And he had a abusive father. So he has some issues about leaving the family and going on his own and ending up in a small mining town. The heroine in this book.
And for people who are listening, we're talking about Rebel Love Song.
Rebel Love Song.
Okay.
So, the heroine in this book has always had something about making things right for women and for children. So she's a suffragette in the 1880s when it has been sort of well known in the newspapers for about 20 years. Her mother was a suffragette as well, and then kind of capitulated and became married and left that business. And this young heroine Jessamine thinks, I'm not doing that. Well, she hadn't met this character yet. But everybody has a little bit of a secret going on.
Yeah.
Books. And it's nice to realize that that's what I'm writing about, so I can be open to it for the next idea.
Yeah. It's funny how it'll take a few books sometimes for you to go, oh, I keep writing about the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I found that in mine too. I have a tendency to write heroines who seem to be a bit ditzy and, a little flighty, who actually find their own power, their own power in life to, but not to control other people, but to just find that they have the power to do with their life what they want, including to love people, to work in what they want to do. To make the world a better place. They have power to make the world a better place and stuff like that.
Yes, I love it. Wow, that's great.
But it took me 3 or 4 books to figure out that's what I was writing about.
Yeah. Raymond Obstfeld is a wonderful teacher for novel writers, and I was lucky enough to be mentored by him in my early days. And he found that he wrote really funny gumshoe detective novels when he was first getting published. And it took him a number of books to figure out that all of the characters he was writing about were him. One of the central characters was Raymond.
That's awesome.
And so eventually he broke out of that to do character development that wasn't him. But it was kind of interesting to hear a really great novelist and poet talk about having to learn not to be just you in the central character role of the book. It was cool.
That is cool. Wow. I wonder, do you know if he's written anything like books for writers? That's a really interesting topic. I would like to read more about it.
Yes, I can send that to you.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
And now let me just say that Raymond Obstfeld is Obstfeld, and you can go on Amazon and find his books, and he's very good.
Excellent. I know I've heard his name, so I don't know if I've heard it because of fiction or nonfiction, but his name is
He just
familiar.
retired from Orange Coast College.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Louella, this has been so interesting. I want to keep going, but I think it's probably time for us to stop, and we'll just have to bring you back and talk more, especially about anything that has to do with, craft. I love the idea of.
I would be so happy to do that, Kitty. This has been so fun for me.
Awesome.
All the writers to go for their dreams.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Everybody needs to hear that, sometimes more often than other times.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, listen, where can listeners find you and your books?
All right. So if you go on the internet and look up Nelson, you're going to find my Facebook pages. You're going to find my website. You're going to find everything that my blog, everything that you need to find on me. And you can go to Amazon and look up my books. And if you go to my Louella Nelson author page on Amazon, you'll see all the books from long ago and from most recent, and short stories and all of that.
Excellent, excellent. And for people who are only listening, it's Louella, Louella Nelson, Nelson.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
It was my pleasure, Kitty.